I often find myself thinking with everything that's happening all over this country, this world, I think to myself, I just can't wait. I wish that some, sparkly lady with a magic wand would come down and tell me I just need to click my heels 3 times and then, I can go home. And go back to something, to wake up and realize that I'm just dreaming or I'm in a fever-induced hallucination or something like that. Does anyone else here like The Wizard of Oz? Any other Wizard of Oz fans? All right. Good. One thing that I loved about The Wizard of Oz when I was a child was the fact that good and evil are really clear. It's really clear who the good witch is and the bad witch is. It's really clear who to root for, and who you don't mind when they're getting melted or killed or whatever, because it's so clear. And, of course, in real life, it's not so simple. It's not so cut and dry. So the musical Wicked, on the other hand, purports to tell the backstory of The Wizard of Oz, and it turns out that the good witch ain't that good. And the bad witch, well, she's not so bad. We discover, as we often do in life, that those who rise to prominence and popularity are not necessarily as virtuous as they often appear. And those who are demonized by society are sometimes the true heroes and sheroes. The women who fought for equal rights for this nation were initially seen as gadflies and troublemakers, uppity women who did not know their place. It's the story of Rosa Parks, of Martin Luther King Jr., of Karen Silkwood, of Muhammad Ali, vilified for standing up, or in one case, for sitting down. It's the story of Stonewall and Colin Kaepernick. When we look at real life, often there's a trade-off between popularity and integrity. It's something that we all struggle with. In Wicked, we find out that Glenda and Elphaba is the one who later becomes the Wicked Witch. They were actually classmates, it turns out, in college, and were friends. And after graduation, when they both sought a government job with the Wizard of Oz, they both learned that their government and their leader, the wizard, were not such great and virtuous as they had imagined. Glenda, the blonde-haired, gorgeous, popular one, decided to accept the job anyway, despite the moral compromises that it required. In essence, she chose social climbing and her economic advancement over her values. And because she did, she retained and expanded her popularity and her reputation as the good one and the successful one. On the other hand, Elphaba, who had never been popular and wanted nothing more than to make her family proud and to earn the love of her father and the wizard, she turned down the position and gave up this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to finally be accepted and honored by her family, by her society, and her peers. It was right there at her fingertips, what she wanted her whole life, what she'd worked so hard to achieve. And now it was being handed to her. It was a moment of truth. It was a point of reckoning. Should she compromise her values and attain success and recognition? She could do as so many do and just accept that the world is unfair. This is the cost of getting ahead. Success, we're told, requires compromises, and heck, everyone does it. Can't the ends justify the means? I mean, she could take the job and then work from the inside to try to create change. There are 1,001 practical rationales that must have haunted her decision. Especially because to not accept the wizard's offer was to deny him. It was to make her an enemy of the state, unpatriotic, and she'd be slayed in the media and be deemed a terrorist. You see, Elphaba was born with green skin. She was different from the moment she was born. People projected onto her difference that she's scary and that something's wrong with her. Defying the wizard would prove to everyone's suspicions were correct, that her difference is a sign of her depravity, and that we are right to fear people like her. There were plenty of reasons to just go along and not rock the boat. But Elphaba chooses her morals over her success, and she does it at great cost. As viewers, we're reminded that things are not always as they seem, and good and evil, as defined by society, is not so black and white. And when we see stories like this, we love them. We love them. We eat them up. Movies and novels and real-life stories of people who risk losing what's most precious to them to do what's right. Something happens in our hearts when we witness such acts. And we wonder, would I have the courage to do the same if I were put in the same situation? Now, I'd love nothing more than to stand up here and say that throughout my life, I've always been heroic. Those who know me now and have seen me standing up for others and taking unpopular positions and receiving some ridicule and resistance for doing it. But that's not always how it's been. I've failed to speak up, and I've been afraid to stand out. You may know that I'm half Jewish on my father's side of the family. It's a very important part of my heritage, and I love my relatives, grandparents, and they mean the world to me. But because I was not raised Jewish and I don't have a recognizably Jewish last name, I've had instances in which my Jewish background is invisible. So I've been in conversations and circles where I heard anti-Semitic comments and other slurs and insults about Jews or about a particular Jewish person. And throughout my life, it's happened numerous times, and it breaks my heart to admit it, but I was often not as admirable as Queen Esther in the Bible, and I stayed under the radar, not admitting my background and not even challenging such comments in order to be accepted and to not lose my standing in the group. Every time I did, I felt a sting inside and only realized later that the sting that I felt was a kind of ontological acid that was eating away at a piece of my soul. I've watched as our nation has tried to make sense of the video clips of Billy Bush and Donald Trump. And I've wrestled with those times when I wanted so badly to be accepted by other boys and men and have let misogynist and objectifying comments go unchallenged in order to remain a part of the group. Now, I want to be clear that I have never, ever been around men who bragged about sexually assaulting women. Yet, if I look honestly at my past, to a lesser extent as a teenager and a young adult, I've been like Billy Bush, nodding and playing along as an older and seemingly more powerful man or male figure is saying distasteful things. Not just about women or Jews, but about gay people and transgender people and people of other races and cultures. I'd be a complete phony to stand up here and pretend that I've always embodied the courage that I often do today. I know how it feels to discount my values and let my pride and my ambition cause me to choose the path of least resistance to compromise my integrity. And I suspect you do too. So I'm not going to demonize Glenda too much. because I understand the temptations and the seductiveness of such a path. I also know that outward success amidst inward indignity and compromise feels awful. To be held up as a hero or as an exemplar outside while feeling like a phony inside is a kind of inner death, a corrosion of the soul. Yet it's not easy to be alive without compromising our convictions sometimes. It can sometimes be a matter of keeping a job and thus keeping food on the table for our families. For most of us, there are times when we've come so far and the goals that we've been working for are so close and so attainable, and we find ourselves trying to weigh the significance of our achievement against the compromises that it will require. A profound example of this happened here at this church back in 2008. I'd been here 8 years as the senior minister, and we'd been growing consistently, not in huge bursts, but slow and consistent growth of membership and programs and revenues and outreach into the community. And we realized that we needed more space. In 2007, the board created a commission to look into our options, and they determined that we needed a major expansion of our property and our building, and we invested hundreds of thousands of dollars buying homes adjacent to the church. We held countless congregational meetings. We spent money on zoning and engineering studies. By 2008, we had spent $90,000 on architects and somewhere in the neighborhood of $15,000 on a feasibility study. And the point is that we had made an incredible investment of time and money and leadership in expanding our church, and all indicators showed that it was right and that it would be successful. And then in the summer of 2008, my colleague Bishop Carlton Pearson asked if his congregation might come and share our building. He was aware of our long history of working for racial justice in this community and our long-stated desire to be a multiracial congregation. His was already a multiracial congregation, but they'd lost their building, and most of their staff and their members abandoned them when Bishop Pearson came out as a Universalist. Before this happened, I had read a book by a minister named Andy Stanley, in which he explained that the quickest path between where you are and where you want to go is rarely an ethical path. His experience helped him to realize that if a person's willing to compromise their values, they can get ahead much faster. He explained that whatever path you're on, there will be moments when you're faced with the challenge of choosing expediency at the expense of your values. In his book, The Next Generation Leadership, he writes, "You will be tempted to believe your ends justify the means, but there will be another voice as well. The message will be simple, short, and without explanation. This is wrong. Against that still small voice, you will hurl thousands of reasons, explanations, rationalizations, and illustrations. But when you're finished, the undaunting voice inside you will continue to whisper, 'It's not right.' And you'll discover that leading with character will often jeopardize your forward motion." He explained, it's only when doing what is right will impede forward motion that you discover if you are a leader worth following. In the summer of 2008, I brought a proposal to the Board of Trustees of this church that involved welcoming the New Dimensions community to share our building. They were Universalists who had lost their building and their popularity and their incredible revenue stream and their reputation as religious leaders in Tulsa and across the world. They were being scorned as heretics, ridiculed as fools, and their loss of status and money were outward signs to the world of their inward mistakenness, if not depravity. From the view of the wider Tulsa community, us taking in these rejected and tainted people was not going to make us any more popular. From the view of the All Souls community, sure, these folks were universalists in the sense that they did not believe that Christianity was the only way to salvation, but they were still Christian, and more than that, they were rather charismatic in their Christianity. Sober and prudent minds were well aware that if we said yes to this proposal, that it was going to generate conflict inside our church. We were going to have to navigate issues of theology, worship style, and music, not to mention differences in race and socioeconomic backgrounds and different opinions about sexual orientation and abortion and God than we were used to. Up until that point, we knew who we were, and we had a clear sense of how we did church. We knew what we could expect at All Souls and from All Souls. We had a culture that included aesthetics and food preferences. And we had hundreds of unspoken understandings that had been developed over decades. Welcoming new dimensions was going to disrupt some of that. It was inevitably going to create conflict and confusion and raise questions about what's expected of us. Most people do not come to church for conflict and confusion. In fact, they come to get away from conflict and confusion. And we were embarking on a $14 million expansion program, and we're about to become the largest Unitarian Universalist church in the country. We knew where we were going and how we were going to get there, and the community had spent enormous efforts and funds to achieve it. Was it responsible to make a decision that would likely upend all of that work and put that opportunity at risk? It seemed foolish. I mean, it might not even work out. People would probably leave. Some major donors would undoubtedly change their minds. And if we're honest, the whole thing was kind of a long shot anyway. Wouldn't it make much more sense to stay the course we were on? I'll never forget the board meeting when we had to decide. And I see some of you are here. There was at least 1,000 reasons not to do it. But after going around and around for well over an hour, we asked the critical question: is it the right thing to do? And there was a silence that was so pregnant. And everyone in that room felt it, and everyone knew the answer. In that moment of truth, everyone knew it was right, and everyone knew that it would be hard and risky and costly. And time has shown us that they were correct. But nobody wanted to build a cathedral to our cowardice. The straight path to our goal is usually not the honorable path. And the popular position is often not the virtuous position, at least not at first. Nobody worth listening to argues anymore that slavery is okay, or that women shouldn't have the right to vote, or that people should not marry or hire or serve people of other races. But the folks who initially took those positions were often demonized and ostracized. Yet they did what they believed was right, regardless of the cost. Would you rather your children grow up to be like Colin Kaepernick, who is following his conscience and making a nonviolent protest, and in doing so has risked his popularity and probably some product endorsements and job opportunities? Or would you rather they grow up to choose external rewards at the expense of their integrity? The right path is often not the easy path. The purpose of life is a life of purpose. That's why true happiness comes from living lives of courage and meaning, and not from prestige and popularity and profit. We each stand before the wizard. Every time we hear a racist joke or a sexist comment, or see a homophobic or Islamophobic post, and decide whether to let it go unchallenged. We do it when we decide to wear a rainbow pin, or put a Black Lives Matter sticker on our car, or in our social media posts. It's the dilemma of the whistleblower, of every person who confronts their boss and quits their job over principle. It's every transgender person who's willing to face the ridicule and loss of status that often comes with living their truth. It's you and me. Every day. At work, at home, at school, in the locker room, in the voting booth. A wise person said to me just the other day that what defines us as human, what makes us human, is that we have the ability to forego our self-interests for a greater good. That's why corporations cannot be people. Because they are ethically and legally bound not to go against their self-interest. It's the definition of what it means to be human. Now, the Unitarian side of our tradition has a long history of stressing salvation by character. They have said that we are saved or made whole, not by what we believe, but by the virtue of how we act. And I agree that our character and our actions are much more important than what we say we believe. But because I'm also often imperfect, and our world is incredibly complicated, I'm also glad our tradition includes the Universalists, who are known for forgiveness and for the hopeful message that we are loved, even though we often fail and fall short. I'm going to keep striving to be a person of strong character, even though I know that the path from here to there is much like the yellow brick road. It's windy and circuitous. It's not straight. And it's filled with all kinds of funky people and situations. When I come to the end of my days, I want to feel that I've done what's right, even when it's costly. How about you?
I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason, bringing something we must learn, and we are led to those who help us most to grow if we let them. And we help them in return. Well, I don't know if I believe that's true, but I know I'm who I am today because I knew you. Like a comet pulled from orbit as it passes the sun. Like a stream that meets a boulder halfway through the wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? But because I knew you, I have been changed for good.
We are your church, and we are proud to be your church, or at least a church that's having a positive impact on your life. I am personally blessed to be your minister, or at least a minister who you're allowing to speak into your life. I hope you'll support our ministry and share your love beyond belief by texting LOVE-BB to 41444 or go to our website. But you can just text LOVE-BB to 41444 and make your gift. It's wonderful. Thank you. Be blessed and be a blessing.